All right, guys, your notes today are on midpoints and distance. Okay, you might remember the midpoint formula for middle school, the distance formula for middle school. Our work right here is to think of these ideas in two ways. All right, not five, not six ways, just two ways. Number one, graphically. Number two, algebraically. Everything that I'm going to show you today, there's going to be a graphical perspective, which is going to make it for some of you very easy, and a algebraic perspective. Okay, so here we go. Midpoint. All right. So let's say I wanted to find the midpoint between the two coordinates, negative 2, 7, and 2, 3. Okay? So short way of doing it, graphical. If you think of this graphically, right, and you kind of think of slope, right, between those 2 points, you realize that there's a slope of down 1 over 1 or negative 1 between them, right? And you can probably envision that the middle point between them is right here, right on the y-axis at 0, 5. So just graphing things in your graph paper notebook is a good thing. All right, that's the midpoint, 0, 5, like end of story. You've got the work done. If you know how to do it, how to think of it graphically, then I mean that's all you need to get the answer right. Okay. What about those of us who like to think of things a little more algebraically, though? Okay, so there exists something called the midpoint formula. All right, which is something you should know. Everyone needs to know the midpoint formula. The midpoint formula basically says you add up your two x values together of the two coordinates, so x1 plus x2, and then divide it by 2. Add up the two y coordinates, y1 and y2, and then divide that by 2. What you're really doing is you're finding an average when you add two numbers and divide by 2. So basically, take the average of the x's, negative 2 and 2, average is 0. Take the average of the y's, 7 and 3 have an average of 5. So my midpoint is 0, 5. That's graphical and algebraic. Okay, now what if I'm thinking about midpoints? Maybe I'm given a midpoint and an endpoint, and what I'm looking for is I'm looking for the other endpoint. So again, graphical perspective. If you think of this as an endpoint, let's call this endpoint A, right? And you look at the slope. Here my slope is up 1 over 1. Right? If I continue, right, going down 1, left 1, for a couple of these, I should realize that my other endpoint B is here at 1, negative 3. At 1, negative 3. That's just visually speaking. Notebook paper, graph notebook paper goes a long way. So that's good. Algebraically speaking, we have a little more work to do, all right, for us to prove that 1, negative 3 actually is the endpoint. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to think of my midpoint formula again. And you can write down your midpoint formula. And what you're going to end up doing, in short, is you're going to substitute values that you know into your midpoint formula. So your work will look a little bit like this. Okay? A little bit like this. And let me reduce that. And now that's way huge. Okay? So maybe a little something like this. I set up my midpoint formula for x, and I set it equal to the x coordinate of the midpoint. I set it equal to 3. Other thing that I do is I go ahead and I substitute my known x value of 5. So you use inverse operations basically to solve for your x1. Multiply both sides by 2. All right, that cancels out the 2 in this fraction, and you have a 6. And then an x1 plus 5 equals 6. Take away 5, you get x1 equals 1. Same thing, your y formula. y1 plus y2 over 2. Set it equal to negative 1 because that's the y coordinate of your midpoint. Multiply by 2 to start it off. So you get y1 plus 1. I filled in my 1. All right, equals negative 2. Take away 1, you get y1 equals negative 3. So I just got the same answer twice. The algebraic way looks a lot more complicated. All right, but it is also doable. Make sure that you copy those notes when you get the chance. Okay? And for my last 30 seconds. All right, so what if I wanted to find the distance between 2 points? 2, negative 9, and 5, negative 3. Short way of doing this, graph yourself a right triangle that connects the horizontal distance and the vertical distance. All right? And you can pause the video to view the calculations. In short, you're going to use Pythagorean theorem. 3 squared plus 6 squared equals c squared. You end up with the square root of 45, which you simplify by simplifying